Yo, what's up guys? Welcome back to another video on the Gooners and Gloves Podcast channel. In today's video, it's going to be the 48th Gooners and Gloves Podcast, and I'm going to be giving you guys my thoughts and reactions to the Bivol Beterbiev card. So I'm going to be going over the entire event. There were 7 fights. This was a really entertaining night of boxing. I really enjoyed it, so I'm really excited to be sharing you guys my thoughts. Now, this is likely going to be the longest podcast on my channel, so let me know down below if you guys want more of this long form sort of content. I'm going to be going quite in depth with all of the fights. I'm going to be covering all 7 of them, so I'm really excited, and please do let me know down below if you want more of this sort of content in the future. But yeah, pretty much let's jump straight into it. So the first fight was Callum Smith versus Joshua Buatsi, and oh my word, what a fight this was. Seriously, an instant classic, a fight of the year contender. Round 6 was genuinely one of the rounds of the year. It was an incredible fight. Really enjoyed it. So yeah, absolutely phenomenal fight, and it's crazy to me that this was only the opener of the card. Domestically, this would be a main event on just about any card, but an absolutely sensational fight, and what a way to open the event. Callum Smith gets the unanimous decision. I agree with the decision. I scored it 115-113 to Smith, so a really close fight, but a very highly entertaining one. Fair play to both warriors. Seriously, this was an incredible fight. They're both absolute warriors. The toughness on display from Buatsi was unreal, and just the pressure from Callum Smith, it made for an incredible fight. This is one that I certainly felt would deliver, and I knew was being kind of slept on, and unsurprisingly, it absolutely delivered. So let's get into the scorecard. So as mentioned before, I scored it 115-113, which is pretty similar to how the judges saw the fight. And yeah, just a really good performance by Callum Smith, but certainly an insane amount of toughness and a spirited effort from Joshua Buatsi as well. But let's get into my personal scorecard. So as you guys can see from my scorecard, I had the first 4 rounds actually quite close. So the first round I gave to Callum Smith. I just felt like Callum Smith was a bit more active in this first round. Joshua Buatsi, you know, as expected, didn't really do too much in the first round. As we know with Buatsi, he likes to work his way into a fight. He likes to feel his opponent out. So for the first round, he didn't really do much of anything. So for that reason, Callum Smith won it essentially just on activity levels. I don't really think Callum Smith did a large amount in this first round either. It was just kind of one of those feel each other out kind of rounds, but I definitely felt that Smith was landing the better punches. He was being like, he had the better effective aggression, and as expected, this fight caught fire very quickly, as you're about to find out in the next few rounds. So even in round 1, while the pace wasn't crazy, it was definitely faster than what you'd expect for a first round, essentially, and Callum Smith definitely played a big part in that. He put on really good pressure, so I think just because of his good effective aggression, his good pressure, he was able to get the first round. Buatsi kind of just felt him out a little bit, did get hit with some shots. So for me, Callum Smith did do enough to win the first round. Then we move on to the second round, and I think Buatsi gave a good response in this round. Buatsi was obviously throwing a bit more and also just landing more. You know, the thing with Buatsi is I did think he was a bit like he didn't throw enough throughout the fight, and this is going to be a common theme, as you guys are going to see. But whenever he did throw, he actually had good accuracy, definitely. And I do think from a technical boxing perspective, Buatsi was probably better throughout the fight. But obviously from a heart, determination, just wanting it more kind of perspective, that's what Callum Smith won out on. And ultimately, Callum Smith clearly wanted it more, the fight, and so he was able to win. But in rounds such as the second round where Buatsi was throwing, he was landing really good shots. So for me, Buatsi did get the second round 10-9 because he landed really good shots, and he was actually responding to Callum Smith's aggression. Callum Smith was still the one on the front foot. He was still the one who was kind of controlling the pace, but I think Joshua Buatsi did really well to respond, and ultimately had a really good second round. He landed good shots, he had good aggression, and ultimately did really well in that second round. So he evened it up. However, in round 3, it was the same story as round 1, although this time I do think that Callum Smith was a bit more effective. In the first round, I kind of felt like Smith only really won it on just purely aggression, but I think in this round, he was actually outlanding Buatsi. He was landing good shots, he was backing him up, and he was landing good combinations, and the combination punching was really strong from Callum Smith. Just really good pressure, really good relentless pressure, and he was really smothering Buatsi's work, because by round 3, Buatsi kind of began to move more around the ring and really trying to find his rhythm, but I think Callum Smith did so well to disrupt that rhythm and not allow it to get anywhere. Basically just not allowing that rhythm to get anywhere. I thought it was really good from Callum Smith, just really smothering that work of Buatsi, and that's why I think that Callum Smith did win the third round. He smothered the work really well, and he threw more punches and ultimately outworked Buatsi in that third round. And in round 4, I gave to Buatsi. Similar reason for round 2. Buatsi actually began to up the tempo, he began to land more punches, and ultimately he was just throwing more. You know, while Smith was really good in that first and third round, hence why I gave it to him, I do think part of the reason was also just because Buatsi wasn't throwing enough. He was kind of maybe also on his, not necessarily on his bike because he wasn't running away or anything, but just kind of just not throwing enough, you know, maybe focusing a bit too much on defense and maybe head movement and not quite throwing enough. But again, round 3, a good round. However, round 4, a much better round for Buatsi again, as he was able to actually land the punches, get the combinations going, same as round 2, got the combinations going, got the punches going, was more effective, was also avoiding more of Smith's shots, because in most of these rounds, Smith was the aggressor. I do want to be clear, in most of these rounds, Smith was the aggressor. He was the one putting on more pressure, and as you're about to see in the next few rounds, he definitely took control of the fight. But round 4, good round for Buatsi, good shots landed, good effective pressure, and a solid round for Joshua Buatsi. Then we move on to rounds 5 to 7, and I gave all 3 of these rounds to Callum Smith. So this is the point in the fight that I think Callum Smith really began to take over. So round 5 was a really pressure-filled round from Callum Smith, and he did actually hurt Joshua Buatsi a couple of times. Not massively, he wasn't like shaken or anything, but you know, you could see he was a bit rattled on his feet. And in fairness, Buatsi was certainly landing heavy punches as well. Callum Smith, in fact, I think around round 5 or 4 is when Buatsi landed a really good hook, which actually opened up a cut on the side of Callum Smith's head. It was like a really good cut, and it started like not pouring with blood, but like it was dripping blood gradually, and obviously Buatsi was trying to target that cut afterwards. So I'm not saying that Buatsi was getting just completely dog walked or dominated, but there's no doubt that Smith was winning these rounds. And round 5, a good round for Smith, and he got the win. Then we move on to round 6, and obviously, as I mentioned before, this one I want to talk about in detail because this is genuinely one of the rounds of the year. What an incredible round of boxing, absolutely sensational from both. So Callum Smith lands a picture-perfect overhand right, absolutely stuns Buatsi, and there's still so much time left in the round, and massive props to Buatsi because it really looked like he was going to be stopped, but he's so tough, he's so brave, and he was able to really just stick it out, survive the round. Not only did he survive the round, but in the final 20 seconds, he himself actually hurt Callum Smith and then began to unload pressure on him. So what happened is Callum Smith got a bit careless, he was throwing a bit too many punches, and Buatsi saw the opportunity, and even despite being hurt, he threw an absolutely fantastic left hook and just completely stunned Callum Smith, pushed him back, and basically ended the round really strongly. You know, had the round gone on a bit longer, maybe we would have seen Buatsi kind of even the round up a bit, but obviously there were only about 15 seconds left. So Callum Smith also made it, but it was a sensational round. Still, Callum Smith still did enough to win the round, so that's why I still gave it to him 10-9, because the most of that round he was throwing punches. I was initially thinking of giving it a 10-8 for Smith because of how many punches he was landing, but because Buatsi was able to rock him and therefore even up the round a bit, I felt that that was enough justification for it to be just a 10-9 for Smith instead of a 10-8. We move on to round 7, and obviously round 7 the pace slowed down, as you can imagine. After that sort of round, you can't be keeping up that kind of pace. So after round 7, the pace definitely slowed down quite a lot, but Smith was still the one who was more hungry, more aggressive. Obviously Buatsi was probably still a bit affected by the shot he'd just taken, so he slowed down the tempo, and that's exactly where Callum Smith needed him, as Callum Smith just upped the pressure, upped the tempo, and did enough to win the 7th round. Then the 8th round, this is when Buatsi finally responded. So this was the first round I felt that Buatsi really was like the aggressor, like the one actually throwing with mean intentions, the one actually backing Smith up a bit. So round 8 was definitely the first round where I felt that Buatsi was actually out hustling and out working Smith, and while it was kind of a little bit too late, you know, he did start to pick the pace up throughout the rest of the fight, and round 8 for me was pretty much the first time he like really outworked and out hustled Smith and pretty much outlanded him. It was a really good round for Buatsi, really good shots landed, really good round, really good pressure and aggression from him, so great round for Buatsi. But then again, Smith came back, and it honestly did seem like Smith was maybe just taking a bit of a tactical break in round 8, but in round 9 Smith came straight back and again put the pressure on, unloaded, and basically just landed good shots. And Buatsi again probably tired himself out slightly in that 8th round, so maybe he was taking a bit of a tactical break. This was obviously a really grueling fight for both men, so there were multiple points where they had to slow down the pace because it's really hard to keep up that kind of pace. But rounds 10 to 11, I think again this is where Buatsi responded really well, really good shots from him landed, and basically these were just 2 solid rounds for him. Callum Smith was clearly really feeling the pace by this point. Obviously Callum Smith isn't exactly young, you know, he's 34, he's had a lot of fights, he's had a lot of mileage on the clock, so obviously he was starting to feel the pace a bit. And also Buatsi's body shots were beginning to work in this round. He had definitely landed some body shots, so they were really beginning to take effect, and he did really well. And it was great 2 rounds for Buatsi, really good combinations, really good front foot pressure, and again this is where Buatsi really began to kind of take control a bit and basically have Callum Smith kind of at bay. But then Callum Smith had a really strong finish to the 12th round. Obviously heading into the 12th round, it was pretty even on the scorecards as we found out, apart from one of the scorecards which was just a disgrace, but we'll get to that in a second. But the fight was quite even on my scorecard. It was really close heading into the 12th round, and I knew on my scorecard it would ultimately come down to that 12th round, and ultimately Smith just showed that he wanted it more. You know, You would imagine that Smith was the one that was up, but he fought like he was down, and Buatsi definitely tried. Like, don't get me wrong, it was a close round, and I can see why some people would have given that round to Buatsi, but I felt that Smith did enough in that 12th round to win it, and therefore overall win the fight 115-113. As I mentioned before, an instant classic, a fantastic fight. In terms of the scorecards, I agreed with, so the one 115-113 is the one that I agreed with, so that was one of the scorecards. The other one was 116-112, which is fair enough, because one of these swing rounds could probably have gone to Smith. But the one that was an absolute disgrace was 119-110. I don't know where that judge got that from. I thought that was an absolutely disgraceful decision. Really, really disrespectful to Buatsi. I actually couldn't believe it. Obviously, it was for Smith, so it's fine because ultimately Smith did deservingly win, but not by 119-110. That's way, way too in the favor of Smith and way too wide and quite disrespectful to Buatsi. So, yeah. But anyway, that's going to do it for the analysis of the first fight. A really, really sensational fight. Absolutely fantastic. And really, outside of the main event, this was the fight of the night. Phenomenal fight. Fight of the year contender. Round 6 is a round of the year contender. And an excellent fight. And massive props to both. But with that, let's move on to the second fight, which was Zhang versus Kabayel. Okay, so we're brought on to the second fight of the night. And this was Kabayel versus Zhang. And obviously, as expected, this was nowhere near the level of the previous fight. I mean, understandably, the previous fight was absolutely unreal. So, as expected, this was just nowhere near that level. But it was a fantastic performance by Agit Kabayel, who was able to knock Zhang out in the 6th round. He was obviously absolutely relentless with the body pressure, the body shots, and just his ability to let his hands go is incredible. Like, Kabayel just knows how to let his hands go, and obviously I'm not saying it's a perfect strategy, and as we would see in round 5, Zhang did knock him down, so it's something that his teammates going to have to work on, but obviously it worked on the night. It was a fantastic performance by Kabayel, just so relentless, and fantastic, just really, really good body shots. I mean, without a doubt, Kabayel is the best body puncher in the heavyweight division, without a shadow of a doubt. This is the 3rd knockout in a row that he's gotten with body shots, and in heavyweight boxing, that's unheard of. You know, in heavyweight division, everyone basically headhunts, so the fact that Kabayel is doing so good to the body is really impressive, especially in the heavyweight division, and it worked perfectly. You know, we know that Zhang's big Achilles heel is his cardio. We know that his power is absolutely unreal, and we saw that even when he was exhausted, he still managed to knock Kabayel down, so we know that Zhang's power is fantastic, but the cardio has always let him down, and on this night, Kabayel made full advantage of that with the body pressure. Still got the scorecard up. Obviously, the scorecard doesn't really mean as much, but, you know, I still think it's interesting to see where I thought the fight was headed going into that 6th round, which would eventually end the fight. But pretty much, let's get straight on to the card. So round 1, we had Zhang winning 10-9. Now, I've got to be honest, this is more just because I just felt he was ever so slightly busier, basically. This was kind of just one of those rounds where neither really did anything. It was an incredibly boring first round. Neither of them really did much. They were both kind of just feeling each other out. So yeah, Kabayel was obviously quite passive, which again is typically how he starts his fights, just because he likes to read how his opponents fight, and I think he very quickly picked up on how tired Zhang was, because honestly, it felt like Zhang was tired before the fight even started. I'm not even going to lie. So Kabayel clearly picked up on that, and yeah, that's where he kind of downloaded the data, you know, experimented with a few shots, but I just thought that Zhang was slightly busier, but there really wasn't much in that round. I wouldn't be surprised if he gave that to Kabayel either. There just wasn't much in it, but I just think Zhang was ever so slightly busier in that first round, so I gave it to Zhang. However, rounds 2 to 4 were a complete whitewash by Kabayel. Really, really dominant performance by him. Just completely dominated him. You know, the body shots were relentless, the pressure, but it's just those body shots, man. I mean, even by the end of round 2, Zhang's body was a complete red mess. I mean, there were welts on his body. It was red. It did not look fun, and obviously that's a perfect sort of strategy. We know that Zhang's cardio is already not good, so hitting the body is only going to make that cardio go even quicker. And obviously we know that Kabayel, you know, he can take a punch. Obviously he did get knocked down, but he certainly can take a punch. But I'm sure Kabayel knew, get Zhang as tired as possible before he can knock me out, basically. And that's exactly what happened. Rounds 2 to 4 were literally the same thing. Zhang landing the occasional heavy shot here and there, but for the most part, Kabayel just absolutely tearing that body apart. It was just ridiculous. Like, uppercuts to the body, crosses to the body, hooks to the body, jabs to the body, just every punch you can possibly imagine he was throwing to the body, and it was working so well. Kabayel just knows how to let his hands go. He knows how to be aggressive, and he showed that against Zhang. Just did not take one backward step, did not stop for a second punching, didn't even give Zhang a second to breathe. And it was fantastic. So that was rounds 2 to 4, completely dominant. Kabayel won all of them 10-9. Completely just dominated Zhang, and Zhang just did not offer anything. And you could see by the end of round 4 that Zhang was spent in terms of his cardio. He was absolutely exhausted. But in fairness to him, in round 5, he did manage to get a really good knockdown, a fantastic shot to the temple that knocked Kabayel down. Fair play to Kabayel, he immediately got up. I think it was clearly more of just a flash knockdown because Kabayel pretty much immediately got up, so fair play to him. But it was excellent work from Zhang to be able to knock him down like that. Really, really good shot landed, and he was able to knock him down. But, you know, Kabayel got up, and I think by that point it was clear that this fight was over. Kabayel came back, threw some shots, round ends, and in round 6, Kabayel completely just went back to the body, knocked Zhang down, Zhang got up, and then finished him off with the body shots. Zhang took a knee, and it was over. Zhang took a knee, could not beat the 10 count, and that was it. Fantastic performance by Kabayel, who has continued his absolute tear in the heavyweight division. This guy's been on such a run, and again, it's his 3rd body shot knockout in a row. Fantastic performance, really, really good stuff. Zhang, obviously, you know, he's not getting any younger, and his cardio is not getting any better, so we'll see if he fights again, but props to him. He tried his best. He hung in there as long as he could, but the body shots were just absolutely ruthless from Kabayel, and it was a fantastic performance. So, not much more I can say about that fight. Great performance by Kabayel. The pressure, the body shots, letting his hands go, it was all fantastic. Defensively, he obviously could have been a bit better. He was getting hit with shots, and of course, did eventually get knocked down. But alas, excellent performance by Kabayel. Not really much more I can say. Really good performance, and with that, I'll be on to the 3rd fight of the night. Okay, so we are on to the 3rd fight of the night, and this was Virgil Ortiz Jr. taking on Israel Madrimov. And honestly, I thought this was a really good performance by Virgil Ortiz Jr., but I'm not gonna lie, I don't fully understand what Madrimov's game plan actually was in this fight. I'm still a little bit baffled. He was kind of like, obviously the lateral move, like he was doing a lot of lateral movement, which, don't get me wrong, is good. Like, I'm not saying you shouldn't do that, but the problem is he wasn't really throwing enough. Like, he was defending really, really well, and you did see throughout the fight, like, even though he, you know, he was getting like pressured quite a lot, it didn't seem like he took that many punches, which is fair enough, but like, he just was far too focused on defense and nowhere near enough on attack, you know what I mean? Like, you know, maybe he was trying to go for like a Bivol sort of strategy where fight on the back foot, throw good punches, and try and win the fight that way, but there was a big difference between Bivol and Madrimov's performance. You know, Bivol, even though he was also fighting on the back foot, he was throwing with mean intentions, you know what I mean? Like, he was throwing tons of punches, even on the back foot, he was still throwing tons of punches, he was throwing with mean intentions, so that was able to actually win in the rounds. But the problem with Madrimov is that he wasn't throwing with mean intentions. I honestly felt like he was throwing more just to keep Virgil Ortiz Jr. off of him, as opposed to trying to hurt him. And when you're on the back foot, and you're not throwing with mean intentions, it's really hard to win a fight. Like, I know Bivol won the fight on the back foot yesterday, but as I said, he did it with, like, he threw heavy shots. Like, he was throwing heavy shots, he was throwing plentiful shots, and that's just, Madrimov just wasn't doing that. He was basically just on the back foot and moving and laterally and stuff, which is all well and good from a defensive point of view, but he just was not throwing enough. And as a result of that, Virgil Ortiz Jr. was able to completely smother him, completely just pressure him, and ultimately, some of these rounds, he honestly just won on activity. Other rounds, obviously, Ortiz Jr. was outlanding him and was doing well, but there were some rounds that he genuinely just won because of activity, honestly, just pure activity. Like, there were some rounds that Ortiz wasn't even necessarily landing very many punches, but because of the sheer activity and the sheer just complete difference in punch output, he still won the round. So yeah, me personally, I scored the fight 118-110. I thought this was a pretty dominant performance by Ortiz Jr. and for me, he won it quite comfortably. The judges had it slightly closer, and I did see some people try and argue that Madrimov maybe won more rounds than the judges thought, but I don't know if I agree. I honestly don't even agree with the judges. I felt this was pretty comfortably in Ortiz Jr.'s favor. I gave it 118-110, so I gave Madrimov 2 rounds, and I gave Ortiz Jr. 10. So, without further ado, let's get into the fight. So, rounds 1 to 6, I honestly thought were just all Ortiz Jr. Like, Madrimov was kind of just moving around a lot and blocking and stuff like that, which, as I said, defensively is fine. That's not a problem from a defensive point of view. But the problem with it is he just wasn't throwing anything. So as a result of not throwing very much, Ortiz Jr. could basically just walk him down and land loads of punches. And as a result of that, he won the rounds. And that's honestly basically how the first 6 rounds went. And you will see a bit later on that Madrimov did get going a bit later in the fight. And that's when he actually started making it more difficult for Ortiz. I just felt that he picked up the pace far too late. And therefore, Ortiz had built up such a sizable lead. And these first 6 rounds for me were pretty much the crucial moment in which Ortiz built up such a big lead, essentially. Madrimov just wasn't active enough. Again, he was defending well, you know, he was moving around well, dodging punches, etc., but he just was not throwing anything back, and as a result of that, Ortiz was able to smother him completely, land loads of punches, get the combinations going, and basically just completely out-hustle him. There were times where Ortiz was getting a bit confused by all the movement, and, you know, you could see his head maybe spinning a little bit, but again, Madrimov wasn't taking advantage of that. You know, he was confusing Ortiz, he was moving really well, but he wasn't taking advantage, he wasn't throwing combinations, he wasn't, like, catching him out in these moments. He was basically he just kind of standing there and occasionally throwing. And for me, that just isn't enough to win you rounds. So for that reason, the first 6 rounds, I felt Ortiz Jr. won pretty decisively. And Ortiz just built up a really comfortable lead. Heading into the seventh round, I thought Madrimov was actually really good. I thought it was a really good round from Madrimov, and I think it's the first round of the fight where his game plan was actually working. His game plan of sticking and moving, landing the good shots, getting away, etc., etc. This is the first round I felt it actually worked, and this is because this was the first round where Madrimov actually started to throw with mean intentions, start to throw with power, and he was landing good shots in this round, definitely. Like round 7 was a good round by Madrimov. He was landing really good punches, he was landing the combinations, and this is where maybe Ortiz actually started getting a little bit more discouraged than he had been in the first 6 rounds, where he was pretty confident essentially. So yeah, it was a really good round from Madrimov, but at the same time, while it was a good round for Madrimov, I honestly just think that Ortiz Jr. was just taking a bit of a tactical break, because obviously he'd probably punched himself out a little bit in these first 6 rounds. So while Madrimov had a very good round, it is also clear that Virgil Ortiz Jr. had completely slowed down in this round and was obviously just trying to take a bit of a tactical break, because obviously he'd obviously had such a high punch output in the first 6 rounds that he was honestly probably just taking a bit of a tactical break in that 7th round. But alas, great round from Madrimov. However, rounds 8 to 9, Ortiz Jr. immediately responds. It was fantastic from him. Again, just put the pressure right back on. And once again, Madrimov just froze. He just wasn't throwing anything again. Like, he came off of such a good round in round 7 of throwing a lot of punches. And then for some reason, again, he just stopped throwing at a high output in rounds 8 to 9 for some reason. I don't know why. Like, once again, he just kind of moved around a lot, blocked a lot, but just wasn't punching at all. So again, rounds 8 to 9, even if Ortiz Jr. didn't necessarily land a lot of punches, he was still winning them just on sheer activity. So yeah, but again, round 10, Madrimov did respond, and I will say rounds 10 to 12 is when the rounds got a lot more competitive. So while I still gave Ortiz Jr. rounds 11 to 12, I did feel these rounds were a lot more competitive for sure. Like, they were far more competitive, they were far more action-packed, and I think that's because Madrimov actually started to pick up the pace. And I do believe that if Madrimov had basically boxed the way he boxed in the championship rounds for the whole fight, that we could have gotten a much more close fight than it ended up being. But round 10, a really good round from Madrimov, great shots landed, and this was probably the first time that he was actually really putting the pressure on Virgil Ortiz. Like, it's probably the first time that he was actually kind of outlanding Ortiz and out hustling Ortiz, because Ortiz again was, I think round 10 is when Ortiz really began to get tired. Obviously Ortiz has not been the distance many times, only one time in his previous fight, and even in that one he looked pretty tired at the end. So understandably, Ortiz was really beginning to tire out, and as a result of that, Madrimov did really well in the round to land the combinations, get the movement going, and basically boxed really well to win the 10th round. But then rounds 11 to 12, I felt Ortiz Jr. took both of them, although these were very close rounds, so I can understand if some people gave them to Madrimov, but I think Ortiz Jr. did enough in these in rounds 11 to 12 to get the victory, get the fight, get the win, and ultimately just see out the fight. So all in all, I gave it 118-110. I think the judges were a bit more like closer, where they gave it like 116-112, 117-111, but for me, I just felt it was 118-110 Ortiz. Fair play to Ortiz Jr., a very good performance against a very tough opponent, because let's not forget, Madrimov is a very credible opponent, over 300 bouts in the amateurs, and obviously 11-0 as a pro against some pretty good names. Even gave Terence Crawford a really good fight, but fair play to Virgil Ortiz Jr., a really good performance, completely dominated in my opinion, and it was a fantastic performance. So Ortiz Jr. remains undefeated, and Madrimov takes his first defeat. Certainly positives for Madrimov, don't get me wrong, the defense was really good, the moving was really good, and whenever he was throwing, he was landing at a good, decent percentage, but I just think he simply needed to pick it up a bit more, and while he did do that in the championship rounds, it just wasn't enough, and Ortiz Jr. was able to win the fight. So fair play. Let me know what you guys thought of this one. I actually thought like they both boxed well. I just think that Madrimov was just a bit too passive, but all in all, I enjoyed this one. It wasn't like an absolute barnstormer or anything, but I enjoyed it. It was a good fight, it was a good performance, and it was a pretty entertaining 12 rounds all in out. So fair play to both of them, good 12 rounds, and yeah, but for me, Virgil Ortiz Jr. won this fight quite clearly. But yeah, gonna go ahead and move on to the 4th fight. Okay, so we are now on to the 4th fight of the night, and this was Hamza Sheeraz taking on Carlos Adames. Now, I've got to be honest, I rarely call decisions like robberies. Like, I very rarely use that word robbery, because I do feel that it's massively overused, but I've got to be honest, I did feel this was a robbery. And look, I like Hamza Sheeraz. I actually wanted him to win the fight. I'm a big fan of him, but like, there is no way that was a draw. Like, Adames won that fight. Honestly, I thought Adames was really good. I thought he was confident. I thought he was on the front foot quite a lot. And yes, maybe he didn't land at the highest output, because obviously Sheeraz was able to block a good amount of them and take them on the gloves, but ultimately Sheeraz just didn't do enough. Like, end of the day, when Sheeraz just was barely throwing back, ultimately those are going to be Adames' rounds, and as you can see on my scorecards, Adames was able to get at a lot of rounds because of just not always because of Sheeraz's inactivity, because there were times that Adamez was genuinely landing at a high percentage, but there were definitely some rounds where honestly Adamez wasn't landing very much, but because of just Sheeraz's inactivity, he was able to still win the rounds. So yeah, I personally had it 116, 112 to Adamez. Obviously the scorecards I thought were absolutely appalling, so let's get into the scorecards. Honestly, this is one of the worst scored fights I've ever seen. Like, the scorecards for this fight were absolutely shambolic. So firstly, we had 115, 114 for Hamza Sheeraz. I have no idea how like a judge could possibly have given the fight to Sheeraz. Sheeraz just did not do enough, so I don't know how one of the judges gave it to Sheeraz. Then the next one gave it a draw, 114, 114, which again, I don't understand how that could possibly have been a draw. Not only that though, but even the one judge that gave it to Adamez, I thought still scored it really badly, because while I agree that Adamez won the fight, I think it was 118, 110 is far, or 119, 110, it's just way too much in the favor of Adamez. Like, Adamez won, and in my opinion won fairly comfortably, but he did not win 118, 110. That's far too much in his favor. So in my opinion, a really poorly scored fight, and especially when you see the insane difference in the actual scores. But you know, this is boxing. Unfortunately, this happens. But in my opinion, all three judges scored it really poorly. The one judge that, obviously, even the one judge that got, in my opinion, the right winner still scored it really badly, because he did not win 118, 110. So, yeah. And I want to be clear. I'm not saying that I'm an expert. I'm not saying that I'm better than judges. I'm not saying that my scorecard's definitely right. But I do feel in this case that my scorecard is a bit more reflective of how the fight went. Yes, Adamez won relatively comfortably, but not 118, 110. That's far too much. And again, I don't see a world where Sheeraz could have won or where there could have been a draw. But anyway, let's get into the round by round analysis. So I actually thought Sheeraz had a really good start to this fight. Rounds 1 to 2, I thought Sheeraz did really well. Adamez, you know, was kind of struggling to go on the inside in these first two rounds, and I think Sheeraz definitely played a big part in that. I think Sheeraz's straight shots were really good in these two rounds, really good crosses, and also jabs, really good work on the inside. And even whenever Adamez was getting on the inside, Sheeraz was really good at immediately moving away, but not before getting in a quick shot on the inside. So I thought that the first two rounds were really good from Sheeraz. I think he had a really good start, and I definitely think that it was just a really good start. I thought he did really well in the beginning of the fight, and obviously we would go on to see not only Sheeraz's confidence go down and therefore his output go down, but at the same time later on in the fight we would see Adamez's confidence and his output increase as the fight went on. But for the first two rounds, it was a really good start from Sheeraz, was landing good shots, good movement, keeping Adamez on the outside and doing really well. However, round 3, I thought was a really good round from Adamez, and this is the first time that Adamez was able to actually properly get on the inside and land the good shots and get the combinations going. And I think that Sheeraz probably did panic a little bit in this round, because he was letting Adamez in quite a lot, and for that reason Adamez was landing really good shots, really good combinations, and really just making Sheeraz work. So for that reason, I did think that round 3 was Adamez's round. It was a really good round from Adamez. Really did well to get on the inside. You know, I'm not saying it was kind of close, but like, I did feel that Adamez fairly comfortably won the round. Got on the inside, did really well with the combinations and the effective pressure, and as I said, pressure was the big reason why Adamez won the fight, and definitely that was a big confidence building round for Adamez. However, round 4, Sheeraz, again, I thought had a pretty decent round. He did respond quite well to round 3, where he was actually able to keep Sheeraz, keep Adamez on the outside. But again, it was a relatively close round. It definitely could have gone to Adamez, but I felt that Sheeraz did enough to keep him on the outside and keep him at bay and land some really good shots while he was coming inside to be able to give Sheeraz the round. However, rounds 5 to 10 is when the fight, in my opinion, completely just flipped on its head, and basically, I don't know what happened, but Adamez just completely took control. Not only would Adamez just boxed with so much confidence, he was getting on the inside so easily, and Sheeraz just seemed to lose all of his confidence between rounds 5 and 10. I don't even know what happened. Sheeraz just stopped throwing. Like, honestly, he was blocking a lot, and defensively he did well. Like, he was blocking well, and he wasn't taking too many crazy shots, but he just wasn't throwing anymore. He became really gun shy in these 5 rounds. I don't know what really happened to him. I think it was clear that his confidence had gone down in these first few rounds. You know, he'd landed some heavy shots on Adamez that maybe would have knocked out some other opponents, but Adamez was still there and still smiling, and obviously that was very discouraging for Sheeraz. Obviously though, we have to remember Sheeraz is still quite inexperienced, and today he's still really young, only 25 years old, never been in a world title fight, certainly never been at this level. So yeah, but it was a fantastic 5 rounds from Adamez. I thought Adamez just looked so comfortable. He was really, and by this point he had completely found his way inside. Like, getting inside was no longer an issue for Adamez. He was getting in there, landing body shots, landing some really good headshots. Yes, a lot of them were getting on the gloves and the guard, etc., but there were definitely a good amount of them getting through the guard as well, landing on the body, landing on the head, and ultimately just giving Sheeraz problems. problems. Like he was ultimately just giving Sheeraz a good amount of problems in those 5 rounds. So for that reason, I felt that Ademez won all 5 of those rounds. Some might argue that a couple of them could have gone to Sheeraz, but I just felt those 5 rounds between rounds 5 to 10 were quite comfortable for Ademez. And basically heading into the championship rounds, I just felt that Sheeraz had dug himself into a hole. As you can see, in the first 4 rounds, I actually had it 3-1 to Sheeraz, but he completely just dug himself into a hole between rounds 5 to 10. So after that, I had it, I think, 6-3 for Ademez. So round 11 comes, and I think it's very clear that, and one thing I must say is Sheeraz's corner was being kind of positive earlier on in the fight, but clearly they began to realize that, okay, he needs the knockout. So as the fight progressed and as we got to the championship rounds, they were very clear with him, like, you need this knockout, you can't be passive anymore, you have to go for it. And to be fair to Sheeraz, he definitely did in the 11th round. I thought he was actually really good, really aggressive, really strong, and I definitely felt he boxed really well in this 11th round. And maybe if we would have seen a bit more of what we saw in the 11th round, like in the earlier rounds, then maybe it could have been closer. But, Sheeraz definitely picked up in the 11th round, and it was a very good round for him. Landed loads of shots, did very well, and ultimately just kept Ademez completely at bay. However, Ademez once again responded in the 12th round. It was clear in the 12th round that Sheeraz needed a knockout. It was the case on my card and on the card of most. It was very clear that Sheeraz needed a knockout. And he did try, but Ademez did so well. He completely stifled Sheeraz's work, got on the inside, and just threw so many shots. Like, it was a very high-scoring round from Ademez. And ultimately, that ended the fight. I'm not going to lie though, as soon as the bell went, I just had a bad feeling we were going to see a controversial scorecard. I don't know what came over me, but I just had such a feeling that it was going to be controversial, and unfortunately I was right. Obviously, as I mentioned before, a split decision draw. As I said, I personally had it 116-112 Ademez. Obviously, we don't know if they'll run it back or not, because obviously as a result of the draw, ultimately Ademez still retains his championship. So ultimately, he still has his belt, but we'll have to see if we get any kind of rematch. It'd be cool, but that's just it. So split decision draw, which means that Ademez keeps his world title and Sheeraz keeps his unbeaten record intact. In my opinion, unfairly, but ultimately, it's not really Sheeraz's fault. At the end of the day, it's the judges who score the fights, and that's how they saw it. I don't agree with them, but this is boxing. So that does it for that fight. A really good performance by Ademez. He definitely impressed me with his movement, his speed, his combination punching. I just thought it was all really good, and especially with the big disadvantages he had in reach and also height in this fight. But yeah, that does it for this fight. So we'll now be moving on to the 5th fight of the night. But yeah, a pretty entertaining. I enjoyed the fight. It was a good fight. Maybe not the best performance by Sheeraz, but fair play to him, fair play to Ademez. A good fight and just a solid 12-rounder. Okay, so we are on to the 5th fight of the night. So this was Shakur Stevenson taking on Josh Padley for the WBC Lightweight World Championship. Now, of course, this was originally supposed to be Stevenson taking on Floyd Schofield. However, at the last minute, Floyd Schofield had to pull out through injury, and Josh Padley answered the call with only a few days to go. Literally, only a few days before the fight, he was in Doncaster fixing someone's loft, and a few days later, he's in Saudi Arabia in a World Championship fight, and my word, he put on such a good account of himself. Like, fair play to Stevenson. It was a fantastic performance. I thought people were slightly harsh on his performance. I thought he boxed really well. I just thought he looked really good. But massive respect to Padley. The guy put on a seriously good account of himself. He made it tough for Stevenson. Obviously, in terms of the scorecard, it looks like Stevenson just completely whitewashed it. And don't get me wrong, it was domination from Stevenson. But at the same time, it wasn't easy. Like, Padley was landing punches. He was making it tough. Like, massive respect to Padley. I thought he put on a really good account of himself. He's not even a full-time boxer. He obviously wouldn't have had full training. He ultimately only got 4 days notice, and he still came in there and went 9 rounds with Stevenson. So massive respect to Josh Padley. He put on a seriously good account of himself. But as expected, Stevenson won this relatively comfortably. He got the stoppage in the 9th round, a really good body shot stoppage. So fair play to Stevenson. So round 1 was I actually gave the first round to Padley. Honestly, I felt that Padley actually did enough in that first round to win, which again, even that, like, what an achievement that is, to be winning a round against Stevenson on only 4 days notice. Fair play. Like, obviously some might disagree and say that Stevenson won it, but I honestly did feel that Padley did enough in that first round to win it. So he won the first round. It was good pressure from Padley. He obviously came out aggressive early, which is exactly what was expected. If you guys watched this fight against Chamberlain back in the Wembley card, the Joshua card, then obviously it was a really, really good performance there as well. So, of course, I expected Padley to be tough, and that's exactly what he was. He was durable, but I actually thought he did enough in the first round to win it. So it was really, really good from Padley, really good pressure, landed some good shots on Stevenson, and ultimately it was clear that Stevenson was just warming into it, but still, fair play to Padley, won the first round. But then, of course, as expected, Stevenson completely took over. Rounds 2 to 8 were just completely Stevenson's. Again, there were tough moments for Stevenson when he was getting hit with some heavy shots from Padley and obviously some good pressure, but Stevenson was in complete control. He was landing beautiful combinations. He was obviously hitting and not getting hit. He was defending really well, and you did see after the fight his face was barely affected, and that's because he was defending really, really well. Obviously, people criticized him. Me personally, I've never had an issue with defensive boxers. You know, I've never called the likes of Pernell Whitaker, Floyd Mayweather, Shakur Stevenson boring, because I don't think it's boring. I think that it's really entertaining watching defensive boxing, so I've never had an issue with it, but obviously a lot of people did. But I thought he defended really well and attacked really well as well. He landed some great combinations, but Padley's just so durable, man. Like, Padley's just so tough, so durable. This guy just refuses to be knocked out via headshot. And yeah, I think Stevenson eventually realized that, and hence why he went to the body for round 9. But yeah, rounds 2 to 8 were pretty comfortably in Stevenson's favor. There's just not really much to say. It was pretty comfortable in Stevenson's favor in those rounds. Landed great combinations, good movement. Did well. While Padley was tough, it was very clear that he was being outclassed by Stevenson. So that was rounds 2 to 8. And then round 9 obviously was 10-6, because had the fight been allowed to continue, it would have been a 10-6 round for Stevenson, but obviously the fight was thrown off. 3 knockdowns to the body in one round. It was just really, really good body shots from Stevenson. Obviously, you know, Padley's tough as nails, so it was clear he wasn't going to go down via a headshot. But end of the day, no matter how tough you are, perfectly placed body shots will knock you down, and they do hurt horrifically, and that's clearly what happened to Padley. And he was knocked down 3 times in round 9 to make it a 10-6 for Stevenson, and ultimately the towel was thrown in. And fair play to Padley's team. You know, even at the end of the 8th round, they said to him, listen, you've already done yourself proud, you've done us proud, however, we don't want to see you keep taking punches, so basically if you don't show us something in round 9, we'll just stop the fight. And that's exactly what they did, and fair play to his corner. At that point, he'd done himself proud. He'd put on a serious performance against a much more experienced and also much more prepared opponent, so there's no need to leave him in there just to be beaten up, basically. So fair play. Stevenson gets the victory, a really good stoppage win. So props to Stevenson for that. So obviously the big talk now is about making Stevenson versus Gervonta Davis. Gervonta Davis, of course, fighting next week against Lamont Roach. So you guys can expect a video about that to be coming. Really excited about that fight. I think it's going to be a really good one. So I would love to see Stevenson versus Davis. I think it'd be a really good fight. Obviously, I do think Davis is the favorite. Absolutely. But obviously, I'm not writing Shakur Stevenson out of that fight either. It could be a really close fight, and I'm excited for it. I hope it gets made. I really want to see it. So yeah, Stevenson versus Davis is the obvious fight to make. It's one of the biggest fights in boxing, and yeah, I'd really love to see it. So yeah, not really much more to say about this fight. Really, really spirited effort by Padley, really tough, but ultimately Stevenson completely outworked him, completely outlanded him, and ultimately stopped him in the 9th round with some really good placed body shots. So yeah, that's pretty much it for this fight. Not really much more I can say. Stevenson retains his WBC Lightweight World Championship. It's exactly what was expected. Fair play to Padley though. Really tough, really durable. Obviously, it would have been interesting to see how the Floyd Schofield fight would have gone, but obviously, it didn't come to be. But fair play to Padley, great opportunity, and hopefully we'll see him again on a Riyadh season card soon, and hopefully he can achieve his dream of being a full-time pro, because honestly, he looked great. Okay, so on to the co-main event of the evening. Joseph Parker taking on Martin Bakole for the interim WBO Heavyweight World Championship. So obviously this was originally supposed to be Parker taking on Daniel Dubois for his actual real WBO World Championship, but with only a few days to go, Daniel Dubois had to withdraw from the fight through illness. So as a result of that, a short notice replacement was found in Martin Bakole. Now, obviously, let's be honest here, Martin Bakole was not in good shape at all. Like, I think it's very clear that this fight would have been a lot better if Bakole was actually in shape. But alas, that takes nothing away from Joseph Parker, who got an absolutely fantastic knockout. A really good shot landed. It was actually on the forehead, and forehead shots are a lot different to like chin shots, because I feel like when you get hit in the chin, like your brain still manages to like basically calm itself down and like stop shaking as much. But when you get hit in the forehead, your brain is just completely gone. Like, it literally shakes so much, like you are not recovering from that, and that's exactly what happened. And honestly, I thought that knockdown for Bakole, like the one that Parker got against Bakole, I thought it was actually quite similar to the one that Kostad Tszyu got against Zab Judah all those years ago, when Zab Judah was knocked down, got up, and was initially fine, but then immediately stumbled and basically was completely out of it. And that's what you call a delayed reaction. And it was a really scary knockout, because delayed reactions are always terrifying, because that your brain has to get hit really, really hard for it to take that long to process. Because yeah, sometimes when your brain gets hit that hard, it takes like a second or two to actually register it. And I think that's what happened to Bakole. Initially he was fine, but then immediately his legs just completely went, and I think that's just because it took his brain a second to register to the sheer power of that shot, and it was brutal from Parker. And as I said, it's a lot different getting hit on the forehead like that, because on the forehead the brain completely shakes and basically you're not recovering from that. Whereas if you get hit in the chin, you know, you can kind of shake it off a bit, you can kind of stabilize yourself, but there was no way that Bakole was ever going to stabilize himself. I did see some people saying it was a premature stoppage. I don't personally agree. I thought that was a really good stoppage. Bakole was clearly completely out of it. He was not gonna, there was no point in him taking senseless punishment. But fair play to Bakole for taking the fight. As you can see, I still put the scorecard up, even though it's completely irrelevant. But round one, obviously I gave to Parker. Bakole was just clearly so out of shape. He was punching really slowly. He was moving really slowly. However, fair play to him. He was landing some heavy shots. I'm not gonna lie. That first round, and even before getting knocked out in the second, he was landing some pretty heavy shots. And I did see a tiny bit of nerves in that corner of Parker, because Parker was shaken by a couple of shots. Because end of the day, no matter when end of the day, obviously Bakole is massive and he's strong, so even when he's out of shape, he can still throw a very heavy shot, and that's exactly what he did multiple times. But fair play to Parker. He calmed himself down, he landed that massive shot, and he gets the win, which means that Parker continues his chase for the WBO World Championship. So hopefully we will get to see that Parker-Daniel Dubois fight rescheduled sooner rather than later. Fair play to Bakole. Fair play on him for saving the event, saving the co-main event, and taking on the fight. Respect to him. As I said, in my opinion, it would have actually been a pretty... in my opinion, if Bakole was actually in shape, it would have actually been quite a closely contested and entertaining fight with multiple knockdowns on both ends. But alas, we didn't get to see it. Bakole was completely out of shape. But fair play to Parker. Got the KO. Absolutely brutal shot. Thankfully, Bakole seems like he's okay, which is always good, because those kind of knockouts where it's a delayed reaction like it was with Bakole are always terrifying. But fair play to Bakole. He took the fight. He took the risk. Fair play to him. Clearly, I don't think this will affect him too much. I think he'll probably just get back to just boxing, because at the end of the day, most people are pretty aware of the fact that he just was not in shape at all for this fight, and that it could have gone very differently. But fair play to Joseph Parker. Fantastic knockout, and hopefully now we can see Joseph Parker taking on Daniel Dubois. Not really much more I can say about this fight. It was literally less than 2 rounds, so there's not really much analysis I can do here. So, without further ado, let's get on to the main event, Bivol versus Beterbiev 2. Okay, so here we go, the 7th and final fight of the night, the main event, Dmitry Bivol versus Artur Beterbiev 2. And oh my word, what a fight this was. Absolutely incredible boxing from both men. The pace, the relentlessness, the determination, the pressure, everything was just on point, and this fight absolutely delivered on every single conceivable level, even better than their first fight. And that is rare in boxing. It's rare that the rematch outperforms the first fight, but that's absolutely what happened last night. An incredible fight. Both men left it all on the line and gave us an incredible fight, and massive respect to both of them. They're both credits to the sport. They box so well, they're so humble, and they're so respectful, and just massive props to both Dmitry Bivol and Artur Beterbiev for what was an incredible fight. So Bivol gets the nod by majority decision and is the new undisputed light heavyweight champion, and I'm not gonna lie, I'm absolutely buzzing. Now, don't get me wrong, I've got nothing against Artur Beterbiev. He's an excellent fighter, an excellent champion, and definitely one of the best. But honestly, I'm so happy for Dmitry Bivol. Firstly, because I genuinely wanted him to win, but also secondly, because I actually predicted him to win. I predicted him to win by points, and obviously I'm buzzing that I got it right. Admittedly, I predicted unanimous decision, not majority decision, but in my opinion, it should have been a unanimous decision. I don't believe that fight was a draw. I believe that Bivol won, but alas, he did get the victory by points, which is what I predicted. So I'm absolutely buzzing. But yeah, fantastic fight, really entertaining fight from start to finish, and just massive credit to both men for giving us such a war. And hopefully we will see that trilogy. Obviously, both men have said that they wanted it. Bivol said he wants it. Beterbiev said he wants it, and very clearly both Frank Warren and Eddie Hearn are definitely going to want it. So hopefully we can see the fight happen on Riyadh season again. So yeah, hopefully we can see that trilogy, but let's get into the fight. So rounds 1 to 2, I actually gave to Bivol 10-9. I thought Bivol had a really good start to the fight, really good. Beterbiev was obviously the aggressor. Let's get it clear. Throughout the majority of this fight, Beterbiev was the aggressor, but Bivol was just so good at matching his aggression, and it's really impressive because Bivol was on the back foot for a lot of this fight, but he just threw such heavy shots. Like, he threw with absolute precision, with determination. I mean, Bivol's combination accuracy last night was absolutely remarkable. It's seriously some of the best combination accuracy I've seen. Like, he would land he would literally throw 4 or 5 punch combinations and land at least 3 of them most of the time. Like, the combination accuracy was just fantastic, and even though Beterbiev was on the front foot for these 2 rounds, he was really getting thrown off his rhythm by just the sheer aggression from Bivol. And Bivol clearly learned his lesson from the first fight, which was basically, I can't only throw back lightly, I have to be throwing back with heavy. You know, if I'm going to be on the back foot, if I'm going to be moving a lot, I have to be throwing heavy shots, and I have to really show to Beterbiev that, don't press me, I'm right here, and that's exactly what he did. Fantastic from Bivol. Beterbiev had a good start to the fight as well, and Beterbiev also clearly learned his lesson from the first fight. Beterbiev only really began to truly up the tempo later on in the fight, which meant that the fight maybe got away from him a bit, so he didn't make that mistake this time. Right from round one, right from the word go, he was 100 miles an hour, completely going after Bivol. While for the first 2 rounds it didn't really work out, for the next 3 after that it definitely did, but first 2 rounds were really good from Bivol. Great movement, fantastic combinations, really stiff, hard punches. And this is the thing with Bivol, like, he clearly knew he has to be throwing heavy shots because ultimately he's on the back foot, so he's gonna have more to prove to the judges. And I think that was the key thing. I think that was the key thinking from the Bivol camp. Like, they still wanted to be on the back foot, they still wanted to move around because they know that Beterbiev struggles against that, but they also need to be throwing very heavy punches to really show to the judges that, look, I know we're being backed up, but we're throwing tons of punches and we're very much competitive. And in my opinion, that's what Bivol did so well throughout the whole fight. Just the sheer thud of his punches was remarkable. And yes, Artur Beterbiev was throwing very heavy shots, and some of the shots that both of these men threw would have knocked out most of their other opponents, but these two are just so elite that there was never going to be a knockout in this. But yeah, first 2 rounds really good from Bivol, excellent movement, great combinations, and really got into a groove and threw Beterbiev off his rhythm. However, Beterbiev responded really well in rounds 3 to 5, and I gave all 3 of those rounds to Beterbiev. Basically, he just upped the tempo even more, and it did seem like Bivol was kind of starting to lose that rhythm in round 3, and it became very apparent in rounds 4 and 5 where he was just being completely walked all over. And I've got to be honest, it was getting to the point where I was thinking to myself, like, is Bivol going to get stopped? Genuinely, after that 5th round, I was thinking, like, is Bivol actually going to get stopped here? Because he's just getting completely walked all over. Like, in the first 2 rounds, yes, he was being pressured, but he was still throwing a good amount of punches and therefore was keeping Beterbiev at bay. But in rounds 3 to 5, his output just completely dropped and he was getting absolutely dog-walked by Beterbiev. So Beterbiev won the rounds 3 to 5 quite convincingly, 10-9. So he took control of the fight. At this point, he was a round up on my scorecard. He took control, and it was just fantastic from Beterbiev. The pressure, the pace that he kept up, and Bivol was very clearly thrown off by his rhythm. He was clearly not expecting Beterbiev to go as fast as he did, and for those 3 rounds, yeah, maybe he was taking a slight break as well, but definitely Beterbiev was fantastic in those 3 rounds and really put the pressure. And I've got to be honest, he even had me thinking, is Bivol going to get stopped here? But once again, Bivol responded absolutely brilliantly, and for me, he won the next 5 rounds. Rounds 6 to 11 was absolutely fantastic from Bivol. Bivol clearly saw that he was getting walked all over and getting way too dominated, so he immediately came back and really just unloaded everything. Anytime Beterbiev would throw a punch, Bivol would immediately follow up with like 3 or 4, and I think that's the key thing that won him these 5 rounds. You know, Beterbiev was still throwing at a high output, sometimes 2 or 3, but Beterbiev always made sure to match him. Not only did he make sure to punch as hard as he was being punched, but he made sure to punch more times than he was being punched. And as a result of that, Bivol just was able to win the round. And again, this is despite the fact that even in these 5 rounds, he's still on the back foot. He's still, moving around a lot. It's still Beterbiev who's pushing the action. But because Bivol was just so aggressive and so good with his punches, it just meant that it was a fantastic rounds for Bivol. And for me, Bivol won those 5 rounds. Some are obviously going to disagree. Some are going to feel that some of those rounds were won by Beterbiev, but I just feel that Bivol was fantastic in those rounds and more than deserved those rounds. So for me personally, Bivol won round 6 to 11. Again, just through sheer combination punching. The combination punching was absolutely on point. The reaction to every single one of Beterbiev's flurries was excellent. Like, he didn't even give Beterbiev a second to breathe. Like, Beterbiev would take like 1 second break, and within that split second, immediately 2 or 3 punches would be coming back at him. And that's exactly what won Bivol the fight for me. Was just, yeah, he was being pressured, but as soon as that pressure stopped, he immediately applied his own pressure. The response from Bivol was fantastic. So fair play to Bivol. Round 6 to 11, I had Bivol winning every single round. So heading into the 12th round, I felt that Beterbiev needed a knockout to win, as did the majority of people, and fair play to him. He certainly pushed the action. Like, he did make it a good 12th round, and I actually felt that Beterbiev won the 12th round, but ultimately it just was not enough. It was too little too late, and for me, Bivol won 116-112. In terms of the scorecards, one of the judges gave it 114-114. While I can see how it could have been a draw, I don't personally agree. I feel Bivol won this fairly comfortably, hence why I give it 116-112. But the other 2 scorecards were more in Bivol's favour. I think one of them was 115-113 and the other one was 116-112. Both in favour of Bivol. Those ones I can get behind, but sensational performance from Bivol, and I was just so happy for him, delighted for him. I wanted him to win, I predicted him to win, and I'm buzzing for him. But again, massive respect to Beterbiev, an absolute warrior, an absolute champion at 40 years old. To be sustaining that kind of a pace in a world title fight is incredible. And as I said before, I really hope we can get the trilogy with these two. We really need to see this trilogy. These two are just destined to be dance partners in the ring. sensational 24 rounds of boxing, sensational 2 fights, and just so impressive. But Bivol becomes the new undisputed light heavyweight world champion. World champion. Fantastic performance, really well deserved. 116-112 on my card. He won the first 2 rounds. Beterbiev got back in it in the next 3, but then Bivol completely closed out the show in those next 5, and by that point Beterbiev was completely spent. That's another thing. Bivol's strategy was risky at times, because I could tell early on he was banking on Beterbiev to get tired, which fair enough, Bivol was right. Beterbiev did get tired, and so Bivol upped the pace. But what if Beterbiev hadn't have gotten tired? But again, this just shows how good Bivol and his team are at making these adjustments and stuff. But massive props to both men. A fantastic fight, a really enjoyable night of boxing, and I really had fun filming this podcast for you guys, so I really hope you enjoyed it. Really had a great time filming this podcast for you guys, and I hope that it was a good listen. Again, if you want me to make more of these long form podcasts and long form videos going forward, please let me know, and I happily will. But without further ado, that's going to do it for my analysis of this whole card. So please comment down your thoughts on all of the fights that took place. I'd really love to hear all of them. And yeah, thank you guys so much for watching. Have a great day, and I'll catch you guys with another podcast soon. Bye bye.